We're going to kick off with, there we go. We will be recording the session, so if there's anything you do miss, we'll have access to that straight after. So we have 4 sessions, as I mentioned. We're going to start with a State of the Union. So we've got 2 speakers. We've got Hannah and Katie from Kepler and Facebook. They're going to be sharing their thinking on what brands should be considering as they plan and run campaigns in this new environment, as they grapple with changing media consumption behaviors, new offerings from platforms, and the challenges around operating in an arena of reduced visibility onto conversion data. We also then have a session focused on signal loss. So iOS 14.5 changes to media platforms are requiring advertisers to focus on more durable signals. They need to look for the balance between privacy and personalization. So Marcus Cumby from Facebook will be discussing Facebook's response to Apple changes and then practical implications for today's advertisers. That will be followed by a session with Nick and Andrea from Kepler and HSBC, sharing some of the steps that HSBC are taking to navigate signal loss and to retain data-driven excellence. Following that, we have a really exciting session on creative for brand or brand DR. It's a topic we're seeing of increasing importance for advertisers with recent increases in online competition. Having to stand out and build your brand is more important than ever. So Sam from Facebook will be discussing why both performance and brand advertisers should care about building brands and how they can achieve success with this approach. And then finally, we tackle one of the areas I think brands find most challenging, how to measure and understand the true impact of their ad spend. So we have Paul Fagan from Facebook, who will be discussing strategies to measure and improve the incremental impact of full funnel spend. We have Peter Rice from Kepler and Sean Omani from Bed Bath & Beyond, who share the way that they're embracing technology and new measurement models to understand the value of their investment. So 4 great sessions. Before we do start those, there may be some of you on the call who aren't familiar with Kepler, so I'm just going to take literally 2 minutes to do a very, very quick introduction. So Kepler have been at the forefront of digital innovation since 2012, before digital was fashionable, to be honest, maybe a bit too early. We were founded to help brands harness the power of data and technology to drive their marketing programs and essentially to drive business ROI. We now are over 500 strong across 8 global offices. We've deployed over 3 billion in media spend across all digital channels, from paid search through to out of home and data-driven TV. But I think what we stand for at the first and foremost is we exist to help drive business impact. We drive between 40 and 400% impact to our clients' bottom lines. And we're proud to be part of Q and Hackhoda DUI, alongside a number of sister companies like IDEO, SY Partners, and Sidley and more. We will share contact details at the end of the session if any of you want to speak with us further. And just a few housekeeping points. We will be recording the session. Participants are not on video, but we will happy to welcome questions. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So if you do have a question during the session, please do type into the Q&A session. If we can't get to that within the session, we will follow up directly following the call. So with that, I'd like to introduce the speakers in our first session. So Hannah is an associate vice president at Kepler. She's a member of the US senior leadership team. She's worked with a number of clients across a number of verticals with specifically significant experience across the retail vertical. There's one back, please. We will get there, but while we do, I'll introduce Katie. So Katie Baldwin leads Facebook's partner management in North America. She's worked with independent and mid-sized agencies in North America to help businesses use Facebook to connect and grow. Katie spent 7 years at WPP leading AT&T as well as several CPG and technology accounts before moving to a tech startup and then joining Facebook in 2012 to help launch the global agency team. They will be discussing essentially a state of the union, like where are we today? What are the latest thinkings and the evolving shifts in personalization and privacy? And what should brands be doing as they consider this world of reduced visibility.
All right. Thanks so much for passing it over to us and introducing our session as well as all the other sessions today. So very excited to kick us off with the State of the Union. As it mentioned, I'm Hannah Grubmeyer, Associate Vice President here at Kepler. And he already kind of gave our intro, so we'll skip over that, but just a quick icebreaker to get us started. So the name of the session is The Big Reset. So we thought we would share something that was a big reset for us personally over the past year or 2 years. So I bought a house in February of 2020. So March of 2020 hit and I was stuck in that house. So that was sort of my big reset and a nice opportunity to be home in my new house. So I'll pass it to Katie to introduce herself as well.
Hi, Hannah. Thank you for having me today. Again, I'm Katie Baldwin and run our agency partnerships team. Quickly would say that I'm a mom since that's super important to me, but you are lucky today that it's probably the first day in 2 weeks I've had no kid home sick who will be interrupting us. And I'm based in Austin, Texas, but I thought it was funny that I'm drinking tea out of my New Jersey cup today because that is where I'm originally from and spent most of my time before heading to Austin for this role 5 years ago. So reset wise, I'd say that I am anti-morning workout, but because now I'm sitting in my bedroom, welcome to my bedroom all day. And I think it's really hard to motivate yourself when you're not out and about. I've become a morning workout person. I don't like it every day when the alarm goes off at 5:20, but I get up and do it. So yeah, that's been my savior, I think, with sitting at this desk all day.
Great. I cannot say the same for myself on the morning workout. So impressive. Great. So I guess just to kind of kick us off, I think, we all have heard about Facebook in the news a lot lately, including some headlines this morning. So I thought we would just kind of lead off with that. If there's anything you wanted to talk about there, or kind of share as we kick off.
Yeah, starting with the softballs there, Hannah. Thank you. No, absolutely. I did. We chatted before, and I did want to make sure that we do take time to address this. I'm actually, I'm wearing my Facebook t-shirt just with a sense of pride today. It has been a hard couple of weeks. I think Nitin mentioned in the introduction, but I've been at the company, it'll be 10 years in March. So I've been here through many new opportunities, I would say, and growth of the company over the past 10 years. And the last few weeks have been difficult ones. And I think that what I feel about that is that, what you see if you're on LinkedIn and see any of the great like data scientists or researchers who feel compelled right now to post their stories and how they see the company is externally what, me as a consumer and you all are seeing in the news, and what we feel and have seen internally just don't match up right now. And, and I do feel like there is some mischaracterization happening right now in the news. And I do just want to make sure that we touch on a couple of things like that, because it has been a hard time. And I know you all are on the front lines as well, having these conversations with, if you're at Kepler with you all clients, and even I'm sure most of you focus on marketing and digital. And so your teams are probably asking you questions about things with us as well, and so I do want to say that that I, on behalf of the company and what our stance is that we do not put profit and growth ahead of keeping people safe. And we do care deeply about issues like safety and well-being and mental health, and want to make our apps safe and supportive for everyone. I don't think I would have stayed at the company 10 years if that was not the tone that has constantly been set from day one. And not even, as not even wanting to have advertising on the platform, and having to do that really slowly and the right kind of advertising, which is what led us to being one of the best advertising platforms in the world. So I think we've invested very heavily in our efforts to combat misinformation, hate speech, extremism on the platforms. And personally for me, and again, this is just my personal opinion, like not looking at any talking points, I can think back to moments throughout the company where I felt this. And so just like to name two of these, just I think back to in 2017 when Mark did his personal challenge. Each year he has done a personal challenge, and he did one where he went around the country in the US and spent time with small towns and community leaders, and came out at the end of that year thinking about how Facebook really should be the town square. And I think it was the 2018 earnings where he talked about meaningful social interactions and the change that we were going to make sure that people were having meaningful interactions on the platform. And that became something that we started to measure quarter over quarter. And like, we took a hit on time spent, an hour spent per day. I think it went down 50 million hours a day of people spending time on the platform with that focus. And so to me, that was just a move that very much counterbalances some to what I'm reading. And just also, I think just to mention that there's just been a substantial people and dollar investment on this as well. So we have 40,000 people at the company. We've grown the company the last few years very quickly. And the majority of those have been people who are focused on working on these type of issues to keep the platform safe, with an investment of over $13 billion. And just to put that in context, when I was looking at some dollar spends on context on this, that's 13 times the amount Pfizer put into building the vaccine, right? And so it's a big investment we're making on this. We still have progress to make. Thank you for being in this with us. And you should hold us accountable and ask your teams and us about it for sure. So I know it's an ongoing conversation. And then quickly, I did just want to touch on the SEV, just because I know that was a hard day for everyone. Internally and also with all of you. So I did just want to say, yes, that did put some maybe funny memes out on the internet that we could enjoy. But on the other side, I think it really, showed us again on our responsibility to the community that, we connect 3 billion people on our platforms and services every day, and that people connect with businesses, they connect with each other. And when the SEV happened, so many partners said that time away impacted their ability to connect with their communities and their business. And it's a real reminder of our responsibility, I think. And so know that that's something we're continually working on and providing information on. There's some great engineering focus posts if you're interested in more details on specifics of the technical aspect of the SEV. But I did just want to share a couple of those thoughts.
Yes, it certainly reminded us all how central the Facebook universe is for all of us and for all of our businesses. And really appreciate your perspective, having been at Facebook for 10 years. You've obviously seen quite a lot of change and quite a lot of growth. So it's great to sort of hear your stories and the history that you've seen and where we are now. Which kind of brings us to our next question, which is that where we are now. So obviously the theme of our discussions today is the Great Reset. And I think that's been true in a lot of ways. That's been from the ways that we approach targeting and measurement, to how people are consuming media, their shopping habits, and even things like workplace changes and what we're seeing as sort of like the great resigning as people are shifting careers and shifting passions. So obviously a lot of change in our industry and across other industries as well. What perspectives can you share from based on how Facebook is managing these types of changes?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say culturally at Facebook, anyone would tell you that our mantra is kind of like at Facebook, change is the only constant. Have it be team changes, have it be new products we're thinking about. So I think the mentality we have instilled in us often is that we need to be ready for change. We need to be resilient and, build strong teams to be able to handle change. So I think that from a cultural perspective, that's how we think about it. I think from, I'm sure we're all inundated with what COVID has done. So just to pass on that part of things, because obviously that's super interesting on how digital has accelerated. But I think, I don't know, I've been doing this for about 20 years, and what an exciting time to be in marketing and digital, right? I mean, you literally don't have to change jobs to have a new job. I feel like right now the change is happening to us, and we're constantly just needing to evolve to keep up with the pace of where we need to go. And I feel like this is one of those moments. I feel like it's really hard, but normally the hardest moments are the ones by which we grow the most professionally, personally, and I feel like the industry in general. Hannah, that would be my sales pitch for the Great Resignation on someone not leaving. How did I do on that? I'm just, but we are dealing with that challenge. And I do think that the truth is like, this is the best training in the world for anything going on right now and where you can go in your career after this, through some of these challenges that we're going to be discussing today. Specifically though, I think that more specifically to iOS 14 loss and some of the things we're going to talk about today, we've spent the first half of the year working with our own teams, agencies, advertisers to help prepare as much as we can. But then obviously the beginning of this quarter was really the time where we had to start learning. And I think it's really all the great areas that you're focusing on today. And we're reestablishing best practices. It's going to be long-term. I would just like set the standard on that it's going to be a gradual process. We're not going to see changes overnight back to maybe before the signals loss. And I would just reiterate that our foundational guidance remains true. So performance principles are important for advertisers to continue to optimize your campaigns and increase your overall resilience. So I know today we're going to talk about some of these things, but adopting tools like Conversions API to share data directly from your server to Facebook, information like email addresses and phone numbers are becoming more important to connect website and app activity. And then exploring resilient signals like more solutions like in-stream video, full funnel is definitely things to be testing and learning. I think also just like at a macro level, what we're thinking about is, you all even had it in your summary that 91% of consumers say that they are likely to shop with brands who provide them more relevant offers and recommendations. But then on the flip side, 97% are concerned about protecting their personal data. And so I think we truly believe that privacy is incredibly important and personalization is worth preserving. And so focusing on solutions and technology over the next year, and again, I'm sure we'll cover this in the measurement session as well, is an important piece that we need to think about and work with you all on so that we can get to a good place with it in the next year in 2022 and beyond.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think just to add on to that from the agency perspective too, I think what we're seeing is, I think what you're describing is this long-term solution driving efforts, which is how do we measure it? How do we make sure we're still personalizing in the best way possible? And we're still seeing that even if we're not quite as able to measure the impact, we know that, Facebook, as well as our other platforms who are also experiencing similar, limitations it's still the right place to be. It's still the right audience. We can still put the right message in front of people as we sort of resolve, how do we measure it? How do we make sure it continues to be relevant? So I think that's sort of the approach we've taken for our clients is it's still the right place to be right now. And I know the measurement piece will come in later discussions today as well.
I agree. I think, again, looking back on the path of the internet in the last 20 years, starting out in digital at the beginning, there was a lot of this that we couldn't do. And we've gotten to a place that it's become, I don't ever want to say easy to do marketing, but it's been easier than ever before with digital marketing and the tools we've had to really look at how we can drive things like acquisitions. And so it is, I'm actually excited, when we look at things like media mix modeling and things like that, things that have stayed similar or the same over a long period of time, I think there'll be a new drive to infuse a lot of what Kepler does best, data and technology, into those tools that have been around forever and reinvent them. So I'm excited to see where the next phase of this goes and what you all bring from a more industry perspective as well.
Absolutely. It's old tools with renewed information and renewed approaches to how we use them and how we kind of move forward. So I guess this is actually a good segue in terms of sort of how we work together. So as things continue to change, how can brands and agencies sort of best take advantage of what Facebook has to offer, remain sort of cutting edge and work together as collaboratively as possible through the changes?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't mention this before, but I've been working with your team, I realized, for 5 years. I've known the Kepler team and can honestly say that the way you all work with us is best in class in terms of collaboration. You did not pay me to say that. It's just true. You all are, you're extremely data and technology driven. You move fast. You think about industry POVs and getting your perspective out there in a strong way. And definitely have just been a collaborative partner to work with in many areas. I think right now, the first thing I'd say is like, we're doing this to you. It's information overload right now, right? And so I know that one of the things that even my team feels is like, we are constantly just getting updates on what is happening across many different topics, but specifically when we look at best practices within the auction, within buying, within like, what to be doing through these changes, who's seeing success, what are the new best practices we should be doing. And I think what's a great thing to have is like, how do you consolidate information? And we're one partner. Like I always have to just remind us that we're one piece of a puzzle. And so to have your teams think about ways to be SMEs and subject matter experts that are really thinking about how to disseminate information clearly and quickly and to bring it all together, I think is extremely important. What like your Kepler marketing system strategy team does. And I think that, knowing when to pivot and knowing when to change for market needs. So that's one thing that has been super helpful. I think openness to try new things. Right now, I'm seeing this in a couple different areas. I obviously will talk a little bit about future tools and alphas and betas and testing new things that may not always work. I think that brings forward a great collaborative partnership. I also think right now it's a lot of, we're going to get into it with measurement later, but there's a lot of test and learn that needs to happen to figure out, like we are truly in this together. We don't have all the answers. And so where I'm seeing a lot of success is a collaboration on that, leaning into even small tests to just try new products, try new strategies, and then see what works in pockets and then what we're able to scale. So I think that's been some good partnership tactics that we've seen. Obviously, things have gotten more technical and complex, like over the last year for sure. And so having technical expertise, curiosity to figure it out, asking us tough questions are all things we have. And then lastly, like I would lean on with what's going on in the world, like Great Resignation wise, it's making great cultures within our team. So I feel like right now, great partnership has truly been leaning into the people front. We've launched a lot of programs on our side, and I know Kepler has as well, and many of you on the calls that focus just on diversity, equity, inclusion, just in general culture at your company. So sharing information, sharing our tools, and working together on that, I think is a really important pillar of partnerships right now.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's probably not something that many necessarily think about in talking about like vendor agency relationships, but I think culture is a big part of that. And certainly know that there's people at Facebook that I've been working with the entirety of my time here at Kepler, which is over 5 years, which, that's when you're seeing a lot of people change roles, that's a long time. That's a long relationship to be building. So absolutely something that I think we've established those strong connections.
And I'd say on that, like top of mind for me, and I know you all, when we're thinking about this, is like retraining is something that takes time, right? And bringing in new people, new ideas is wonderful, but also we want to be able to do that and make sure that we, have people who can understand the complexity right now and on both sides, and have your team be able to share the complexity with the clients and us all be focused on the things we're really good at. And so I think focusing on people and making sure our teams are thriving and reducing burnout right now. I mean, we can't say it enough, even though I know we're talking about the big reset, but a lot of these topics can be heavy for us. And so we have to focus on how we're all making sure to take a step back also at the end of the day.
For sure. You also mentioned our marketing system strategy team, which I'll just make a plug for as well. As you said, Facebook's one partner with a whole lot of updates and a whole lot of changes, and we're getting that from all different angles. And I think having those centralized expertise to be able to really understand, be the expert, and then disseminate and train other teams, especially as we have new team members joining our ever-growing team, has been really critical. And I think they've established strong relationships with partners across the board to kind of help us with that education. All right. So I guess, we've kind of talked about the bad and the ugly, and I kind of want to talk about the good. We've talked about the good as well too, but just sort of as we're looking forward, what do you see as the bright spots for Facebook or for the industry in general that you're excited about?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about this. So my last work trip prior to COVID, so February, I believe it was February 2020, was coming and doing, I think, this session live at Facebook, having our time together, which is crazy. This year, obviously, we're doing it like this. Like, if I'm looking out into the future, what do I hope for is that if we can't, I hope we're in person again, but if we're not, that we are in the metaverse, like in the future, in our headsets, feeling like we are all together in a room. So, I mean, we could geek out all day long about that. And this is way far out, but definitely the company is starting to talk about that as a bigger theme. And I'm excited on what that's going to look like. So building the next phase and the next computing really systems, and starting to just get like a taste and flavor of what that would be. And we've requested to have our teams be able to test out wearing headsets and doing some of our meetings, and we're still waiting on getting that to be able to dog food it. But I mean, I hope that we get to a place where we can use that for client meetings as well. Obviously, that's 5 to 10 years out, though, way far out, and not really like what we're focused on today. But I'm excited about it. And I do think sometimes there's so much going on today that I did just want to, joke around and mention that, because like we should also be excited about this innovation in the future that I think we all are at the forefront of being able to create for the marketing industry and actually consumers in general. Okay, but more specific, I think, like, I'm very excited about commerce right now. I think you've been hearing about commerce for a while. Obviously, we started to launch shops. It was 2020. And we've been adding new features. We've been working with partners like Shopify, and now we are at 1.2 million shops on the platform and 300 million visitors per month. We've also launched tools like Facebook Checkout. And I think we're like consumers are adapting to this new behavior. We've always known Facebook as a discovery platform. I think that we can be one of the most powerful discovery commerce platforms in the world. And consumers are experimenting more and more with what we see to be like immersive and experiential digital experiences in general with COVID. So video, AR, VR, conversational commerce, live commerce, I think continue to show a lot of promise and growth. And they mimic kind of what we used to do in store in a digital format. So I'm super excited about that. I'm also excited about creators. I think that we've done a lot of investment right now in creators, and we just made another big announcement of $1 billion investment in creators. We have millions of creators on our platforms today, and we want to be the best platform for that in general. I think we've also just seen in pockets a lot of success with creators and influences right now within signals loss and campaigns. So I think that, there's some implications of this today, and then what we'll see in the future as well as we just double down on this for our platforms. So that's another area. And I think lastly, our video products. So in-stream reserve and just the content on that with long form, and then shorter form video is continuing to blow up. Things like Reels, feels like the moment when we launched stories several years ago. I feel like that kind of traction behind it. And I think that we'll be focused on a lot more heading into 2022. And obviously you are really well positioned, I think, with these opportunities, and have kind of, I felt like with your Video Center of Excellence, the retail commerce team, have continued to push us to have information on this and to be figuring out how, your clients and the industry should adapt these tools. So definitely has been a partnership in progress on those.
Yeah, that's great. And we obviously are excited to sort of be at the forefront of everything always. So for anyone who wasn't familiar with that term metaverse that Katie mentioned, that was sort of the headlines this morning. So do some Googling. But definitely, I think everything you laid out there is it's exciting. It's sort of where we want to be. I think,
what are you most excited about?
It's funny, your mention of influencers and creators, that's a sort of passion area of mine. I think it used to be the Wild West of how digital could work with creators. And I think we're starting to see how that can come to life in a more paid perspective. Whereas in the past it was, more organic focused, I think. So I'm excited about that. I want to see more brands kind of find the right fit for them and how they're executing, and make it a little bit more measured and a little bit more integrated into their marketing plans. And obviously video, I mean, I think mentioning stories a couple years ago, I remember that moment. I remember we're all like, how do we do this? And how do we teach creative teams? And how does this come to life? So, you know, thinking about reels like that, thinking about video like that, I think is the right way to be thinking about it, because it's going to be ubiquitous, and it already is, the same way that stories are. So.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a nice moment in advertising on things like influencers and where video is, because it does feel more whimsical and fun. And I think that that's something that consumers like. I think us in advertising, we like that as well. And so I think it's just been fun to think about creatively. I'm excited for the session later on this, but how to think differently, how to, you know, write your briefs, but lean back with influencers that you're not, you know, making them look exactly like what your brand would do if you're doing the advertising anyway. So it's a new world and a lot to explore and figure out on this.
Definitely. I think the word authenticity is a bit of a buzzword, but I think that's exactly the goal with something like that. And I'm also looking forward to the creative discussion as it comes to brand and DR and what it all means coming together. I didn't see any questions come through the chat. Is there any closing words you wanted to end on, Katie, or anything we should kind of take away?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I'm going to take the time to always say thank you. I know I started out with like kind of a long, like heavy part and topics. And I think, you know, I think we're all, I want us all to stay, I know everyone needs to be focused right now on Q4 and holiday, and that there is a big holiday season ahead of us right now, with also a lot, I mean, my mom just visited for 2 weeks and I had to shut off the Today Show because like if I saw another thing about supply chain issues, then maybe or Princess Diana, but that's another story. I was going to lose it. But the truth of the matter is that we have a lot going on. So I do feel like all of us need to focus together on just like executing, making sure we're all doing the best practices right now. And then I just would say like continuing to talk about these topics. So the hard ones perform on the front of Facebook and being good for the world. And then the ones on just like where we're progressing together. I think there are conversations that all of us do want to dive into with you all and work together to figure out. So just a big thank you for you all at Kepler's partnership and all of the clients on the phone. We appreciate you and know that, you know, we have your best interest at heart on making sure that your business is as successful as possible right now.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. It was great chatting with you. And I think that wraps up our session here. So I'll pass it back to you, Nitin.
Thank you, Katie, Hannah. What a great session. I want to share what I'm excited about. I mean, I'm really excited about the future of commerce. I think that's both what we will buy, because I think priorities have changed, and also how we'll buy it. I'm excited about the opportunities to tell more engaging stories in a more creative way. And I also really like the big reset. I'll share mine quickly. My son was born, so my second born, my son was born in March 2020, a full-on lockdown baby. So I've had, depending on how you look at it, both the fortunate and unfortunate experience of spending near on 24 hours with him for a year and a half. So big reset time for everyone. Just a quick admin point for everybody on the call. I realize that you can normally see probably a number of boxes on the call. If you just click on the 3 dots on the right hand of anyone who, except for me, on their box, if you just click on that and click on hide non-video participants, you'll be able to see the people who are just speaking. So it'll be a slightly nicer view. So if you would go ahead and do that, it would be a slightly more enjoyable experience. So we're going to move on to our next session. So this is a session focused on signal loss. So first up, we've got Marcus. So Marcus leads the business product marketing for Facebook's growth division. There we go. Thank you very much. He specializes in ad optimization and delivery. His focus in the last few months has really been around navigating signal loss. I've heard he knows everything there is to know, particularly the impacts of Apple's iOS14 releases. Prior to joining product marketing, Marcus was an agency partner manager for Facebook for 2.5 years, working with, again, independent and mid-sized agencies in North America. Following on from Marcus, we'll have Nick, who is a client partner at Kepler UK, and Andrea from HSBC. So Nick has got over a decade's worth of experience developing media and creative strategies. as well as planning, buying, and executing digital media solutions across a number of advertiser verticals. He's currently responsible for leading key client relationships with HSBC and delivering business growth for our key partners. Andrea, again, thank you for joining us. Andrea, she's got 6 years of experience working with paid social in the UK and the Nordics. She's currently the paid social lead at HSBC's UK Digital Hub, looking after the social channels and the performance for the UK brands within the group. So first over to Marcus.
Hi everyone. My name is Marcus Cumby, as was mentioned, I should say, and I'm the product marketing manager here at Facebook. So I'm excited to talk to you all today about some of the areas where things that we have seen on our platform, but also give you some insights into where we're going as it relates to this general concept of signal loss. But also just overall changes that we're going to have coming to our platform as it relates to the iOS changes, et cetera. Before I start, though, I do actually also want to touch on the sort of big reset theme. So a big reset for me this year was actually last July. So July of 2020, I moved from Chicago to New York City. So definitely an experience and a big change for me. But just given the theme of everyone else, I wanted to kind of touch on that as well. But anyway, so we can go to the next slide, and I'll sort of talk through, where we certainly have been, and again, where we're going across the different components of our platform. So I think the first thing I'll call out is we completely and totally understand that the last quarter of the year, so where we all are right now, is a very busy and important time for all businesses. So this year in particular has presented a ton of challenges, right? We know that businesses are really trying to focus on executing marketing plans while also navigating a sea of platform and privacy changes across the entire online advertising industry, and not just with Facebook. We know that these shifts have been driven by more regulation, evolving expectations around consumer privacy, as well as changes to platforms and operating systems. And most recently, Apple's iOS 14.5 policy changes and the limitations imposed by their protocols have made the data that our system uses for advertising and measurement fundamentally different. And what I mean by fundamentally different is that the data is now more partial, will rely more on modeling more than ever, is aggregated, and or in the case of Apple's updates specifically, delayed in getting to our systems and other systems altogether. So as a result of all of this, and with the iOS 14.5 adoption ramping up since July, there has been an impact on advertising delivery as well as reporting with performance fluctuations. And I'm sure as everyone has seen, increased CPAs and just general volatility overall. I want to call it that it's very important to recognize that these known reporting gaps that exist do not mean that our platform is not driving real business value for advertisers, or that your campaigns aren't resulting in a purchase or a business event that you care about. These changes really are making it harder for us to measure the outcome. So last month, I believe it was, we released some information as it relates to just this general concept of underreporting on our platform. And our estimate is that in aggregate, we are underreporting iOS web conversions by approximately 15%. The thing I'll call out about that 15% number is that is a very broad range for individual advertisers. And we believe that the real world conversions that are happening, like sales and app installs, are higher than what is being reported in our platform. But did kind of want to call out just that's kind of what we've been seeing in aggregate for a bit since the launch of all these changes. Now, in terms of where we're going, I want to again restate that we are extremely committed to helping advertisers measure the outcomes and also improve the performance in light of all of these changes that we're seeing from Apple in the industry at large. And we're confident in the product updates that we have rolled out have provided an improved experience. And we feel very confident that these are going to also provide additional improvements for advertisers over time. In the short term, I want to call that in the coming weeks, actually, advertisers can expect additional improvements to our reporting solutions. And in the coming weeks could see an improvement in performance and additional conversion availability in visibility in reporting for their campaigns on our platform. So some of these improvements we've already rolled out, including adding view-through into the default attribution setting. And some of them we actually are going to be rolling out again in the coming weeks. So we're actually going to be announcing today, actually, that we're going to be making some improvements to our modeling capabilities and also expanding the capabilities of our aggregated event measurement product. So our aggregated event measurement product is the product that we built to sort of process the data in this sort of new iOS 14.5 plus world. And so we will be announcing today, again, some enhancements to those capabilities. So please look out for additional details on that. Over the longer term, we want to help advertisers continue to drive strong results through personalized ads. And you likely have seen us talk a little bit in publicly about this concept of redefining personalized ads. And so we're going to be collaborating across the industry to develop new, what we call privacy enhancing technologies, or PETs, that are going to help us minimize the amount of personal information that we process while still allowing us to show relevant ads and also measure the effectiveness. So definitely, as we get closer to the new year, please look out for additional information on that as well. We go to the next slide. I can talk through just some performance considerations that advertisers should keep in mind. So I mentioned, of course, we have things that are going to be rolling out literally in the coming weeks, but there definitely are things that we are best practices, or just things to sort of consider in the interim, and certainly into the future as well. I guess the first call out here is that it is very likely that advertisers will continue to see purchases and events come through your own systems that may not be reflected holistically within Facebook or other API-powered reporting. And again, this does not mean that we aren't driving value and those impressions aren't resulting in a purchase or a major event. It just is making it harder for us to measure the outcomes. And while we do expect that we can close some of the gaps with some of the solutions that I referenced, this gap will likely continue to exist. I mentioned teams across the company, including my own personal team, is invested in understanding how our systems are adapting in this new world and also how it stabilizes. But these are just a few of the different tips that you should consider as our system goes through this long-term process of stabilization and recalibration. So the first is really focusing on structuring your campaigns and your strategies to be in line with exiting what we call the learning phase. So generally speaking, this is a best practice we've always had in place that I would say is more important now than ever. But where possible, reducing the number of ad sets that are in the learning phase can really help drive focused performance, and also help our machine learning system focus more on driving strong results. There's a number of ways that you can do this. The first way that I think is most common is consolidating as much as you possibly can where possible. And this could be from a budget perspective, this could be from an audience perspective, or it also could be from reducing the frequency of the manual edits that you're introducing into our platform with your campaign ad set and ad structures. So it's not to say that we don't recommend that you alter these settings or alter settings for your campaigns, but just being more mindful about when you're doing so that you aren't sort of causing your system to stay in an extremely long period of the learning phase, which we know is a period when results can be the most volatile. And then the second is, where possible, adhering to the 50 conversions, or the approximately 50 conversions per week. This is something that, again, is exactly connected to the learning phase. This is exactly what we mean. But leveraging as much signal and consolidating as much signal as possible is something that is going to be important here in this new world where signal loss is sort of occurring more and more across the industry. The next thing I'll call out is sort of being cognizant of nuances as it relates to modeled reporting. So I mentioned earlier, but this new landscape, this new world that we're in, is causing platforms like Facebook, and not even just Facebook, all platforms really, to focus more on this concept of modeling where we do not have full visibility into certain actions that happen. So on the Facebook side, one of the things that we recommend is the following in this new world with model reporting. The first is if you're optimizing for a conversion focused campaign or any campaign that is down funnel, to consider waiting a minimum of 72 hours or the full length of the optimization window selected before evaluating campaign performance. And this is important given the 24 or in some cases 72-hour delay that can occur from certain users that have taken specific actions on Apple's iOS ATT prompt. And it's not to say that we should not look at campaign performance, in under a 72-hour period, but we should just be mindful of what actions are taken or sort of, what conclusions are observed or hypothesized until a 72-hour period, given the random delay for those specific conversions. And then another thing I would say on this as relates to model reporting is where possible, and this is not always possible, but generally speaking, where possible, we recommend that advertisers have a look at the campaign level when it comes to performance versus the ad set or the ad level. Again, not to say that creative is important, not to say that ad set level was not important, but just knowing that we are having to rely more and more on modeled reporting, it may be wise to sort of look at the campaign level as sort of the main indicator and the other levels and a bit more secondary or tertiary. The next thing I'll call out before I go into app is to implement with our conversions API product. And this is something that I know you've heard Facebook talk about ad nauseum, but I would be remiss to not mention this here as well. The conversions API is a critical solution to help navigate the evolving ad ecosystem and also future platform changes. So as you know, and as you've seen and heard from us, the Conversions API product is less dependent on browser technologies than the Pixel, and it also will enable businesses to optimize for results that are much further down the funnel and closer to the outcomes that matter. So this is a product that we are recommending advertisers integrate with as soon as possible to help both improve performance today, but also safeguard performance as browser technologies become less effective in the near future. So that is another sort of key call out that I wanted to make sure to note as well. So if we go to the next slide, I'll touch quickly on app. I'd say app is very, very similar to web here, but I do want to make sure that I touch on this given that I know that there are likely some advertisers on the call that have some app focused goals. So similar to the website of things, we are going to be announcing a good amount of updates very soon as it relates to what we're doing in the app space. But a few of the things that we'll be working on is actually removing some of the known pain points that have existed since the rollout of Apple's prompt for the app side. And more specifically, what I mean here is app deep. We're going to be reintroducing app deep linking for re-engagement campaigns, and also removing the current ad account limitation that exists today for scan campaigns. So this is something that we've heard loud and clear from advertisers. That this is a big pain point, and so we're excited to announce these improvements. We're also going to be making some improvements to scan reporting. One of the things we actually communicated about just last week is that we're going to be supporting view-through attribution for any campaigns on a platform that are leveraging scan, which has been a really big ask for a bit of time. And we're also going to be investing in some mitigations to reduce some null or empty conversion rates that we have seen on the app side since the changes. So this is, again, a really, really exciting sort of time for us to innovate on the solutions that we have introduced. And we'll have more details on these changes for app and also changes for web today. In terms of the performance considerations for the app side of things, they're very similar to the web side of things. So, we recommend always that advertisers consider the learning phase and reducing edits as much as they possibly can. But I think more specific to the app side of the world, there's a few things that are worth calling out here. The first is that we recommend that app advertisers adhere to the 128 app install per day threshold. So this is something that a best practice that we've sort of developed post these iOS changes. It's something that we will definitely continue to learn more about and update and change this guidance over time. But very, very similar to that 50 optimization events that I recommended for web, we know that there is sort of a similar threshold for app. And so on the app side, that is about 120 app installs per day. It's sort of a goal to sort of aim for when you're structuring and setting up the structures for your campaigns. Next is to leverage our automated app ad solution. And this is really designed to sort of help advertisers consolidate their campaigns and also provide a little bit more automation in machine learning backing to drive success for your app campaigns. Where possible, bucketing your targeting audiences together and sort of reducing that segmentation where you possibly can. It can also help drive performance. And then very similar to the website as well, waiting at least a period of 72 hours before evaluating performance is also another thing to consider, given the reporting delays that exist from Apple's updates. So with that, that is the last slide that I had to cover. I think if you want to turn it back to you to queue up the next section, and I'll stay on and just in case there's any questions that do come up as we get through the next couple of sessions or next couple of slides.
Well, thank you, Marcus. So we're just going to turn to Nick and Andrea. Again, Nick from Kepler, client partner in the UK, and Andrea, social media channel lead for HSBC.
Perfect. Cheers, Nitin. I think keeping in theme with the Great Reset, I'll share mine. So essentially after a year of being quite bored and getting a lot of takeaways, I'm quite glad now to be kind of sitting back with the family and making a lot of meals from scratch.
Yeah, and I think my big reset was probably focusing more on health and well-being and prioritizing my 10,000 steps a day, or trying at least.
Cool. So yeah, navigating the signal loss that Marcus touched on with HSBC UK. So we've been working with Kepler with Andrea and the HSBC team for the last roughly 14 months, both remotely and in person. And with our goal to basically create a best-in-class digital data-driven excellent marketing program. And you can imagine we've missed all of the complexity and the uncertainty which Marcus described. It's up to us to help navigate a lot of that. Next slide, please.
And to give you a little bit of a background about the current situation, HSBC UK consists of 3 brands. So it's not only HSBC, but it's also First Direct Bank and Marks and Spencer Bank. And that means that we have a lot of internal stakeholders with different internal targets and goals, and also different way of measuring long-term and short-term targets.
And with that comes a lot of complexity as well. And so within the different products, you've got some which have a longer lag to application to sell, some which have a really short lag. You've also got this inconsistency of quality. And so even though we are kind of driving that conversion application, we have then the added complexity of how do you increase your accepts, people who be accepted through an online conversion rather than be referred or declined. They're still useful, but they're as less quality to HSBC UK. And then finally, I suppose a lot of the reliance on E2B, which essentially stands for existing to bank, your first party data, versus your prospective or your new to bank customer, and how a lot of the signals that we are taking from the existing to bank to help model and to drive that new to bank customer plays into hand as well. And so as you can see, there's quite a few challenges already without the kind of added complexity of the digital ecosystem as well. Next slide, please. But that's fine. I think we've missed that, and I think we can understand that there'll always be challenges, and I think it's our job here to help focus and prioritize where we should put our attention and resources. And so our approach to optimizing the media operating model doesn't just assume optimizing media. We also look at how we can optimize our setup, our strategy, our frameworks, our models. And so I won't touch on all of these, but essentially making sure that it's not a binary case of we've ticked the box and we can kind of leave that. It's continuously updating, continuously optimizing our performance against that as well. So whether it be for updating, validating, which is essentially looking at what success criteria, enhancing, which is how we can explore to add on to that as well, whether it be designing or redesigning that framework, implementing, which is essentially doing it, and then finally evaluating and understanding, did we actually hit that success criteria before then finding out the hypothesis, what goes on the market to then update again. Next slide, please.
So we tailored together with Kepler and Facebook a roadmap for tackling signal loss. And we started off last spring 2021 to work with the iOS 14.5 changes and events due to the ATT implementation. And prioritizing 8 events, it was quite a challenge for us since we have quite a huge portfolio of different products. And it also became apparent that we had to have a discussion about business priorities, what events are prioritized from a business perspective, but also from a marketing and campaign perspective. So we decided to split it out into a short-term solution as well as a long-term solution as well. And hence we also started to create macro events for the conversion events that we have available, to fitting more events into one. After a couple of months, we also did an audit on how the actual changes had affected all our current campaigns and products that we had live on social, and tried to tailor the campaign after these results.
Great. So then the events were kind of set up, and now it's a case of understanding of what the impact we had on our performance. And what we saw was, as Mark alluded to, a slight increase in the kind of CPA from that short-term aspect of driving performance. And so what we then did, work with HBC UK and Facebook to start optimizing not only the performance but also the setup. And so as Mark alluded to before, lifetime budgets was a very big one for us in terms of we're very used to tinkering and having those audiences quite segmented and kind of finding out which audiences are driving uplift versus which ones are kind of below the benchmark. And this is very much a whole restructure of the way that we kind of set out and planned on the platform. Instead, moving away from the kind of small tinkering to kind of larger lifetime budgets, more strategic pieces, more consolidation of our audiences to have like broader audience sets, and really getting the team to understand the importance of that learning phase and how we can quickly get out of that to drive as much performance as possible.
And next up, what we're working on currently is the conversion API and server-to-server integration. And how we're doing this is Facebook and Kepler has actually done a traffic light system for us that tailors everything we need to have in order to us to integrate the conversion APIs. And this keeps us a bit accountable as well with deadlines and timelines, and also facilitates the conversation and collaboration we will have with the actual tech team who does the integration.
The only thing I want to mention on the conversion API is, even though we have an array of different variables to pass back, we're working very closely with the team to understand actually which variables do we need, and taking a very customer-centric approach to ensuring that we're not just passing back data for the sake of passing it back, but understanding, is this needed, is this useful, is this required, for us to then model and kind of help our performance of data as well. The last one I want to touch on was measurement, and I know we've got a whole section on measurement, but essentially what we've discovered or kind of realized is that these challenges and these issues are not just affecting Facebook specifically, they're affecting the whole ecosystem. And so with that, we need to revamp our kind of measurement and how Facebook fit in with how we actually go about reporting success and incrementality on the program. And so as you can imagine, it's still really uncertain in terms of what effects that will have and how it will kind of play out on our media plans and performance. But again, we're collaborating very closely with the teams to build out a sprint. And so we're actually in week 1 of our current sprint, where we're working with our MMM partners, Facebook directly, campaign and marketing effectiveness teams, Andrea obviously, and Kepler, to all get together and kind of try to work this out between us, to then have a methodology which we can then roll out across the other brands and the other products as well. Next slide, please. And that really was a whistle-stop tour of, I suppose, how we are trying to navigate a lot of this uncertainty and signal loss. But we do have some key takeaways over the last kind of 6 months we've been working across this. The first is the ongoing testing and consistent program measurement, making sure you have that framework, and it doesn't have to be the same as what we have, but making sure that you are optimizing your program rather than just optimizing your media.
And just to add to Nick's point, it's important to also have long-term and short-term priorities. What are you doing right now, and what are you doing in the future? So tailoring a roadmap is an excellent way of keep track on what your actions are.
I touched on this before, but and I think Marcus touched on it with pets, and something that's very much kind of dear to us as well is how can we very much reset this and not make the same mistakes as probably we had done a decade ago when we had access to this wealth of data, and actually start to take this from a customer-centric approach in terms of actually what data do we need to actually improve our performance, rather than just having a kind of wealth of data that kind of backfill.
And last but not least, I can't stress enough the importance of collaboration between Kepler, Facebook, and HTC on finding solutions on how to tackle signal loss, because you all need to be a very strong team to be able to adapt to the changes in the digital ecosystem.
Brilliant. Thank you both. Thank you everyone in this session. Nick, Andrea. Andrea, looks like you've had some real challenges in having to prioritize just 8 events and build that optimal setup. One side effect, though, I feel that it's done is, it's brought the HSBC teams together. It's forced you to collaborate and work towards, common goals, which I think is a really good side effect of that. Maybe we could look forward to inviting you back at a future event to discuss how successful you are with the Conversions API and how far you've got in advancing your measurement. We'd love to have you back, but thank you both. Also, thank you to Marcus. I think it was really great to be one of the first to hear about Facebook's approach and updates that will hopefully help advertisers better understand the impact of Facebook advertising. I really like the recommendations around campaign setup, integration with the Conversion API. I personally learned that it's probably more important than ever to hit those learning thresholds rather than creating micro-segmented audiences with slight differences in the data that's used to build them, maybe building up bigger audiences where they're relevant. But thank you all for that session. It was really great. So next up, I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Sam Doyle for our brand DR session. Sam is one of Facebook's creative shop leads. Facebook's Creative Shop is a mission to discover and democratize creativity. Anyone that knows me knows I love creativity in advertising. So it's to democratize creativity that lives up to the potential of our platforms and businesses of all sizes. It's enabled by a culture of inclusion, proximity to people, space to innovate, and is there to empower businesses of all sizes. Looking forward to this. Thank you very much, Sam.
Cheers, Nick. Nice one for the intro. I'm not sure. In fact, I know I couldn't have done it better myself. So I'm really, really excited to be connecting and speaking with all of you today. One of the kind of great pleasures of what I get to do is, as Nitin said, work in a team that takes a very in-depth and hands-on approach to what the future of creativity looks like. And then our real goal is to, in exclusive situations like this, democratize it by sharing it with businesses like you so that you can take advantage of what we're learning in Facebook about creativity and digital advertising and apply it to your businesses today and actually tomorrow. So think of this as sort of the journey between brand and DR that we're going to go on in an evolving ads ecosystem. And let's go through a little creative forecast, because if we go on to the next slide, what we've really been trying to do is start to become much more intentional about what the creative climate is within our platform, so that we can start to give you empowering insights that allow you to do better advertising in the months and the years to come. And what's been quite interesting is that the creative climate has always been influenced by culture. And what we're trying to do is really look at what has emerged over the last year that you can take advantage of moving forward to start influencing culture ourselves as brands and create a much more meaningful connection with our customers that then drives sales or the brand metrics that you want to drive. So we've gone to the next slide, please. Where did we get this information? I used to work in creative agencies, and when I was in that world, I would hesitate to say that a lot of my opinion was kind of formed as a creative director from consuming culture, but not being maybe as analytical as I should. And I think that was kind of the past, and a lot of our creative agencies have moved forward in that way. What we do in Creative Shop is we look at the hundreds of pieces of kind of lighthouse work, and we have a clear definition of what lighthouse work is, and it's how does it have impact across our platform. We're really, really keen on what the kind of business metrics are, and is there a clear relationship between the creativity that we're seeing and the impact that it has. We of course care about craft, and is it actually, you know, telling beautiful stories, because humans in the end don't see our targeting, they don't see all of the stuff in the background. What they see is a picture, a video, or a story that resonates with them and then drives them to buy a product. And we've developed these forecasts off the sort of top percentage of those 100 lighthouse pieces of work that we gather every year. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So what we've kind of seen here is that people are really pushing for their brands to become more culturally aware, more personal, and more participatory. And one of the things we've realized in a post-signals world is that we are really seeing creative become one of the most important factors in a campaign success or failure. We are starting to think of it as kind of like, if you think about exercise, it's always going to go better, and you're going to perform better, have less injury, and kind of just excel in your field in terms of sport if you've got a really strong core. So I've been encouraging clients on my teams to start thinking about how we develop that creative six-pack so that we really, really can excel in whatever our goal is. So we've gone to the next slide again as well, and there's some builds. These are the 5 kind of cultural shifts and highlights in terms of behavior and how we start to build creativity for the future. So the 5 of them are, we need to build inclusively. We have always been firm believers in this, and what we're starting to see is the data to back up this opinion. If we build advertising as diverse and inclusive as the audience that we're selling to, they will respond. Edutainment is a theme that I'm going to dig into. Selling with ideas. So how do we start to actually collapse the funnel a little bit and bring more of the ideas that we would have reserved for brand into how we actually start to shift product? How do we speak the platform language, and how do we reward self-discovery in our customers? So I'm going to dig into each of these a little bit more, share some examples, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. So if we go on to the next slide, build inclusively. So if we click on, really what we're starting to see is that people, real people, and removing that idea of consumers and thinking a little bit more about human beings, rose up and spoke up for a world that sees everyone. And we've seen this across culture, we've seen this in politics, we've seen it in entertainment. And the brands that broke through over the last year, and I think will do so in the future, started fully reflecting and depicting their audiences and found wider acceptance and relevance by doing that. And really this saw an average sort of business score in terms of how we rate our work much higher. So it was above the mean when we saw that inclusivity was at the heart of the work that we shared in terms of business impact. So let's just dig into one example. L'Oreal. So, you know, and if you click on, we'll have a build here so that the work plays while I speak, because it's much more interesting than I am. L'Oreal is one of the longest established beauty brands in the sector and in the space. But one of the things they really embraced in the last year was to give a chance to advocate for a much more representative beauty audience. And they did a complete campaign from brand awareness right through to hard-hitting DR work, to a messenger bot that allowed you to consult based on skin color, gender, to create a much more inclusive beauty experience. It was also the first time that they had used men to show their beauty products and show how that can work for them. And so what's really, really interesting here is that I think maybe a few years ago, we would have thought of inclusivity as a very much a brand play. But when you look at this example from L'Oreal, what we start to see is how inclusivity can actually permeate every aspect of our communications and be beneficial to how we tell our product story, not something we have to layer on or add, but actually something that is intrinsic to the story that we can tell and how we can make a product relevant to as many people as possible, wherever they're from or whatever backgrounds they have. So if we go on to the next slide. The other thing I wanted to share with you, and what I'm also really excited to share, is that this will be an external deck which we'll be able to pass around afterwards so that you can bring it to your teams and include it in your processes, is the Springboards. So it's all well and good for me to share an example from someone like L'Oreal, but not give you a little bit of the how. And one of the things we're very keen on are what are the creative springboards, the kind of provocations and questions we can ask ourselves when we have a brief or we have a job to be done, that allows us to build more inclusive work. So some of those springboards can include, or the questions that we can ask ourselves during the marketing or creative process, is how can we authentically and truthfully represent our whole potential audience? And that authenticity is key. I think our audience, and excuse the language, have an awesome BS radar when it comes to inclusivity, and we really need to make sure that we're authentic and we have the right to be speaking in that space. Another great question to ask yourself in terms of the brief and the work is like, what if there's a group of people we're currently overlooking that we could serve better to create a more inspiring and inclusive body of work for them? Is there a topic or issue for which we could uniquely advocate or champion a solution? And is there a cultural taboo that we could shed light on in an authentic way to make a deeper connection with people? And so these are just some of the questions. We also have an amazing external resource called Beyond Bias, which is a framework you can work through with your teams to make sure that your advertising is as inclusive as possible. But we have seen it not just be something that we should do, but something we have to do and something that really drives business change and transformation. So if we go on to the next slide and our next theme, create edutainment. So that sounds like a made-up word, and it might be. So if we go on to the next slide, without a lot of choice, one of the things we found is that we quickly opened our eyes to new ways of learning. So if you look at the past year, we think about things like iOS14, but we also think about how consumer habits have changed during lockdowns, pandemics, work from home, greater screen time and engagements. Brands that earned attention within this space and context built experience that reimagined learning. So it didn't feel like a chore, and that could feel in relation to their product, but it could also feel in relation to how their product serves people within their lives. And again, this showed us a really, really above average impact in terms of the business score that we looked at in Lighthouse work. So if we go on to the next slide and an example of what this might look like. So I love this one because some of this is global work, but my actual team that I manage out of Dublin worked on this. And this was a project for an amazing charity called Copperfield. And ultimately they promote breast cancer awareness so that people of all ages, shapes, sizes, skin colors, and even gender can start to take control of their breast health. And they did this by using their unique humorous tone of voice. And if you just hit one build, we can see the work. But they built a thumb-stopping campaign that drove users to a messenger bot experience that actually allowed them to do a self-check. Because in a lot of countries in the EU and in the British Isles, you're not eligible for a free breast check until you're over a certain age. So we really wanted to democratize this. And what's really interesting is that this idea of leveraging advertising tools like a messenger bot to actually allow people to go on this journey led to enormous change. So we had thousands of people going through the bot every month, and we even had people find something and then get directed to the help that they needed. And those who didn't were allowed to set themselves up for a reminder to be checked in the future. So this is a very sort of for good example of what we mean when we talk about edutainment. But we've seen other examples from sports companies about how to pick the perfect sneaker. We've seen fintech make enormous leaps in edutainment in terms of the fact that we're realizing that there's a huge appetite amongst millennials and Generation Z to become more financially literate. And those brands that are leaning into our platform as a way to educate are really, really starting to see that return on investment and that impact. So if we go on to the next slide, what are some of the springboards that we can ask ourselves in terms of like, how do we bring a certain amount of education, whether that's around our product or service or something else that we can align with at a value-driven level? So what if we turn the problem to solve into a behavior we want to create or for people to emulate? I often think of this as the best way when there's a comprehension issue around your product. How do you use edutainment to show people how it works and how it's beneficial to their lives? How can we turn our story into compelling entertainment, passive or active, that earns our attention without feeling like a chore? So if you have got a hard sell or you have got something complex to explain, make it entertaining, because people love to be entertained. And if we were going to reward audiences for their time and attention, what could we give them? This doesn't have to be transactional, but I do think that one of the things we've seen, and I noticed it recently in a personal experience with Arket, is they looked for feedback on a recent order that I'd made. And at the end of that small questionnaire, they gave me like a 5% discount. And the brand sentiment that builds was amazing. The experience was also all entirely in Facebook Messenger bot, so they already had me, and you know, as a Facebooker. And then how could we turn our ideas into something truly useful for our audience? I think brands that are offering utility beyond the products that they serve are staying front of mind with customers. So if I've been given utility by your brand and then I think about the category and when I'm making a purchase, you're going to be the first person I think to, because I'm already positively disposed to you. So on to our next theme, sell with ideas. I think if we click onto the next slide, with the evolving ads ecosystem, we know that our feeds have always been spontaneous and always on discovery engines. And what's interesting now is that with the absolute exponential rise of digital consumption and online shopping, people have never been more comfortable than ever with the idea of being presented with a brand, being introduced to a product, being introduced to an offer. And really what we're seeing is that brands at the forefront who are really having huge business impact don't just open the conversations with ideas. So they don't just think about it as a brand play. They feel that it's intrinsic to driving conversions and driving those all important mid-funnel metrics as well, like consideration. So if we click on to the next slide, Allbirds, and if you just click for the creative, a really, really exciting, environmentally friendly sneaker brand that have been branching out from lifestyle to actually sports utility as well. In this example of their campaign, they didn't just launch a shoe, they really wanted to take the key motivations of durability and sustainability and turn them into an idea. And this idea was to run hard, but tread light. So we shouldn't have to compromise the things that we do, like running. As a trail runner, this really resonates with me. But you know, the clothing industry is one of the least sustainable ones. And what's really interesting is that if you look at these three executions, they had this big piece on the left here, which is like introducing the dasher, the idea that nature wins and we all win, really keeping it close to what runners love, which is that idea of competition, being out in nature. But then the visual language, the idea of sustainability and the kind of copy and creativity actually permeated its way all the way through the different executions, from the very, very product focused to the material focused. And I think this is really, really essential and easy learning that can be applied to all campaigns. Because if you look at the brand ad, it's really product focused. And then that consistency follows its way all the way through. If you saw all of these separately or at different times, you would know they were from the same business, saying the same thing, encouraging me to take the same action. And that is one of the kind of key tenets, I think, of why creativity is the strong core that we need when we think about the activity of advertising. So if we go on to the next trend in our forecast. Nope, we need the springboards. So how do you ask that question? Sorry, back one. Which is showing me why I'm sort of at 4 p.m. in the afternoon here. So questions to ask yourself. It's very easy, again, for me to show that example, but how do we bring that to our processes and our briefs? And what's interesting is I'm kind of giving you questions as opposed to frameworks, because I think these are the most adaptable things you can take without having to reorganize how you structure your business or your ideation processes. So how can we use a differentiating concept, not only to drive interest, but to convert potential buyers? So what is an idea that doesn't just let people know we exist, but lets people think, I must buy this product or I must get involved with this service? And what if we could turn a pivotal sales moment into a thumb-stopping idea? I think this is an essential one as we come to the sort of Black Friday and holiday season. One of the issues we get to is that people really just focus on the percentage discount. But what makes you stand out when all of those other advertisers are doing the same thing? Is this pivotal sales moment the perfect opportunity to have an idea and to make your brand unique and stand out and drive those sales? What if we leveraged an aspect of our brand, product, or a relevant moment in culture to inspire a larger idea? So how do you tie your product to a cultural moment, to a movement, to a moment in television or in film that allows you to kind of create a sales moment there? And what audience needs, what does an audience need to know about us better? And how can we design experiences that speak to their key motivations? So really being clear on, and honest, and I think taking a hard look at ourselves and like, what's stopping people from buying our product? And how do we overcome that? How do we turn that barrier into a motivator through a concept that dispels those notions or that idea of friction that's stopping them from making the purchase? So now on to forecast 4, speak our platform language. So if we click onto the next slide, as makers and advertisers, I think what we've noticed on our platform is people aren't just coloring outside the lines, we're really reinventing them. And the entire industry has gone through a reinvention phase over the last sort of 18 months. And what's interesting is that brands who are turning heads have really leaned into something we're calling lo-fi methods of production. So, one of the things we all want to do is bring the highest level of craft to our platform, but actually what happens when we start to use user-generated content or creators or much more sort of, as we say, lo-fi production approaches? And how I like to describe this is, how do we stand out by fitting in? So if we go on to the next slide, Lotte Chilsung, which is a cider brand, relaunched their brand by not building their creative themselves. So they had a very, very sort of like semiotic, was a big word that I'm going to use today, idea around spicy loves chill, which is really trying to describe the remarkable flavor of their cider. And what they did was they actually gave a brief out to creators across the markets that they wanted to advertise in, who were really focused on creating digital art to try and capture that flavor, which they then used as their ads and layered over their branding, layered over their message. And what's really, really interesting is we're seeing this as a trend across a lot of high-performing brands. There are people on this platform who are building content better than anybody can. And how do we collaborate with them in a meaningful and equitable way with them to create content that truly resonates in a way that their own content does across the platform and the potential audiences there? So if we click onto the next slide, what are some of the questions that we can ask ourselves to start making that decision about whether a lo-fi approach or speaking the platform language or standing out by fitting in is the right thing for us? So how can the natural language of our platforms be an integral storytelling tool to connect with people on their own terms? So what are people natively doing? Are they using polling all the time? Are they using AR filters? Is emojis a way that they like to sort of communicate instead of words? All of those things are things that brands and businesses can leverage to be more relevant. And if we leverage an existing platform trend, can we make our story even more relatable? What if we activated a community to tell a shared story in their own language and from their own platforms and their own points of view? And which creators' authentic voice can help to diversify and amplify our own, like that example that I just shared? And now on to the final our forecast themes, which is reward self-discovery. So if we go on to the next one, a big thing we're thinking about a lot is this idea of evolving commerce journeys. So people have jumped down the digital rabbit hole over the last year, and they really loved where it went. And brands connecting deeply realized that brand building, and then ultimately the conversions that come off the back of that, is a participation sport. And it's really feeding the consumer's desire to explore brands on their own. So they have this moment where they connect with the brand, and then they want to go deeper and actually start to interact with it, which then drives them to a longer term relationship in terms of purchases and brand perception. So we go on to the next slide. A household name, if ever there was one, Hellmann's, have a great campaign, which is that Hellmann's is the kind of key ingredient that makes food interesting. And they gave their audience utility, which was how to make the most of leftovers. So what they did was they did an awareness campaign about what that means, what the difference that turns leftovers into a delicious meal. It's Hellmann's, but also let's make this practical. So they created a messenger bot and a campaign that could connect people who had leftovers in their fridge and didn't know what to do with it, with this community of social gastronomy online. And they could literally ask in real time for recipes, for advice based on the products that they had. And of course, Hellmann's was always at the heart of that solution. So how do we start to ask ourselves, if we go on to the next slide, how do we bring that notion of self-discovery and let people really dive into our businesses, our brands, our products, and our offerings? So how can creating ideas that drive participation and discovery elevate our connection with our audiences? Big question to ask before we do this. What linear stories can we tell? But what if we built our ideas as rewards along that narrative path with the hope of delighting our audience along the way? And where could we use the community's real-time feedback and support? And how could we take their ideas and turn them into action? So how do we actually start a two-way conversation across the platforms that we have in order to drive more meaningful connection, maybe tailor our products? I think a bicycle brand called Van Moof are amazing at evolving their product based on consumer feedback, which then creates unbelievably loyal customers and recommendations for new ones. So it's a great example. And that is, I think, the last one. So I just want to say a final thank you for listening. Also that we will be circulating this deck with more examples so that you can really dig into it. And yeah, just thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sam. You really didn't disappoint. I absolutely love the session. I really enjoyed the creative springboards. I think they're a really practical tool for brands to just have a discussion around creative. I think the Allbirds example also shows that, it's just not enough today, and what you showed us throughout, it's not enough today to just take a creative made for another channel and cut it down to size and expect it to do anything beyond mediocre. I think it's another example of why we have to bring teams together. If you're building something for Facebook, you're building something for a certain environment, you want to build something specific for that environment, something that will work. I know at Kepler we've seen a lot of great success with retailers using UGC in innovative ways and really getting their customers doing the talking. I love the idea of working with the creators. Look, thank you very much, Sam.
My pleasure.
For everyone else, it's our final session. I really appreciate your attention so far. We're going to be discussing full funnel measurement, just a really key topic. You've seen it hinted at throughout the speakers today. That's going to be kicked off with Paul Fagan. So he's going to kick us off. He's Facebook's marketing science partner based in Dublin. He's particularly interested in the ways in which persuasive system technologies can influence user behaviors by using personalized persuasion. So the old adage of the right message, the right time, in the right way. And then after that, we've got Sean Amani, who's Vice President of Digital Marketing at Bed Bath & Beyond. Over 12 years experience across all aspects of paid media, extensive experience across data analytics, testing and measurement. And he'll be talking to Peter Rice, who leads our marketing systems and strategy department at Kepler. He's a member of our senior leadership team. And Peter's experience, Peter's got experience working across data systems, measurement and attribution, data collection and technology across pretty much every advertiser vertical at Kepler. So I'll hand it over to Paul.
Thank you very much. Okay. So when we think of full funnel marketing, it's quite intuitive, to think of this as a process, a linear process, of bringing a single cohort of users sort of just down a funnel. But over time, we've kind of found this to be quite inconclusive, or at least not really, capturing the full story, especially for performance advertisers. Advertising is fundamentally about reaching people where they are in order to sooner or later inspire an action. And successful marketing depends on activating both upper funnel awareness and also bottom line sales as well, in such a way that they would be operating simultaneously to multiple audiences at the same time and over time. And as well as, of course, having the right measurement in place to really kind of capture these effects. And so when you get it right, full funnel marketing really helps you to maximize sales in the short term while also building brand for the long term as well. So if we click onto the next slide, I'll just run through what we're going to cover. So first, I'm going to discuss a little bit about what I mean by full funnel and explore how it can be a strategic growth tool. Then I'm going to cover a 4-stage framework for how you might begin to sort of improve this full funnel integration. And then finally, because as Sam said, successful marketing really depends on following creative best practices and innovation, but also being able to use that and make decisions based upon accurate data through experimentation. And it's for that reason why I'm going to end on the topic of why it's creative that will really be the key driver for your campaign effectiveness. So to begin with, how do we think about brand building at Facebook and what is its relationship to full funnel marketing? So as you can see on screen, brand building is just a longer term process from activating sales in the short term to generating sustainable revenue growth in the long run. And really what my argument today will be is, how can we go through this through full funnel activation? And if we could just skip on to the next slide, please, and actually the next one as well. So let's just begin by what we mean by full funnel. As I said in the intro, a full funnel approach is one which should help you drive both short-term and long-term goals. And there's really a couple of key challenges that are worth highlighting. The first is of audience exhaustion. So we may not achieve our goals because we've exhausted our performance audiences and therefore need to find new audiences. And the kinds of approaches that you might be thinking about here would be a diversified optimization approach and a diversified creative strategy. So I'll just go through those in turn. So a diversified optimization strategy, the kind of question you might ask there is, what would be the value of adding brand on top of our performance campaigns, with the rationale being that by achieving a higher reach, we're building audiences over time for our future lower funnel campaigns. Whereas a diversified creative strategy would involve exploring how different messages resonate with different types of audiences. And the goal there would really be to build a system of different messages that would be able to appeal to a wide variety of audiences. And actually, we have a series of new tools that can kind of help you there. These are machine learning creative insights tools, such as Gamma, which are available for use just thanks to our relationship with Kepler. So it's definitely something that I would reach out to your reps to gain access to. And so the first challenge was one of just the audience exhaustion. And the second challenge is really one of measurement. So how do you actually measure the long-term effects of brand building? Because there's a lot of different ways of measuring brand, and it's quite helpful to know the differences between them. So at Facebook, I think it's fair to say that we've traditionally looked at, measuring the short-term effects of campaigns, maybe over a few weeks, up to 3 months. But we can also now look at the longer-term effects, such as up to half a year, through some, technical jiggery-pokery of extending out our holdouts, and also by delaying our polling. But you might also be interested in, well, those kinds of measurement, again, it's still relatively short, and it's probably just evaluating the effects of individual campaigns. What's the effect of our branding over a longer period of time? And this is where we're seeing clients really innovate through, the creative use of marketing mix models, for example. So let's just begin by just sort of diving into a bit more into the diversified optimization strategy. So the delivery system will help you achieve your short and long-term goals through the objective that you actually choose. And if you just want to click one more time, please, the objective that you can see on screen will determine which audience you'll actually reach through your investment. So just by way of a very quick recap, the people in your target audience will have propensities for different kinds of behaviors, which is to say they'll have different estimated action rates, and the objective you choose will decide who you reach amongst those audiences. So for your brand objectives, if you optimize for brand awareness, you're more likely to basically reach people to recall an ad. If you optimize to video views, you're more likely to reach people who are going to play a video, etc. there. So the kind of key takeaway there is that, when you're using this kind of machine learning, that it's just important to make the distinction for what you're really trying to achieve, and to go for that objective and not just another objective. And if we move on to the next slide, the strategy here then is really to leverage a blend of both brand and performance objectives, and that it's in this blending, in this combination, that you'll be able to maximize the number of sales in the short term while also building your brand over the long term. Some extra critical information here. You should have your conversion activity ideally running all of the time, helping the system to learn and improve. And also because there will be people who will not be in market just for, if you just launch a campaign for 3 months, you want to be able to capture these people as they move into the market. And so a kind of an always on approach is really helpful for that. And then for brand, it can be a bit more challenging to perhaps to argue for the constant pressure that we might always want. So you may need to think of just smart phasing of investment, I guess, that can, be extremely helpful and improve performance. So the next question then, what I want to look at is really the measurement challenge, and just look at a couple of examples for how social media can really drive brand growth over the long term. So the example that you see on screen is from Heineken, and basically they wanted to build a clearer picture of both the short and long-term impact of their brand building campaigns, but on ROI, which is kind of one of the holy grail questions that an advertiser might actually have. So in this case, what we did was that we used MMM, and we were able to analyze 2 years of their marketing activity, and came up with the following discoveries. 13% of their sales could be attributed to the legacy effects of previous brand building marketing campaigns across all channels. ROI of ad spend on Facebook increased by 71%, and this was when the long-term effects were taken into account. And similarly, there was 1.7x higher sales that were gained from advertising investment from all marketing channels once these longer term effects from campaigns were taken into account. This slide is extremely busy, but I just want to quickly illustrate how these brand effects can actually be modeled. So I'll just focus on the top left figure that you can see. And in this time series, what you're looking at is first the immediate effect on sales, which are all of the spikes. And this is down to your marketing activities, promotion, media spend, that kind of thing. But you're also capturing the indirect effects of brand on sales. For example, how brand building is kind of accelerating sales in the midterm. And finally, you can also see the long-term growth of delayed purchases, loyalty, volume, value growth, that kind of thing. And really there, if you just take notice of the rising baseline, just showing that those long-term effects. So now I'm just going to quickly run through a framework that can be pretty useful for tackling specifically this kind of challenge of exhausting audiences. So what you can see on screen now are basically 4 stages, and they are based around the differing levels of existing brand activity that an advertiser might be running alongside their performance campaigns. So you've got build a funnel, number 1, and that's to introduce or increase branding campaigns in order to build those audiences. You have number 2, which is improve the funnel, follow the best practices here, in this case, in order to improve brand and performance optimizations. 3, optimize the funnel. In this case, we're thinking about adopting a better budget split between awareness, consideration, and conversion. And finally, you have number 4, expand the funnel. How can you increase your investment while maintaining a positive ROI? So I'm just going to dive in a little bit on each of these, beginning with the next slide. So again, you can kind of plot where your brands are based on the current investment in brand and also the degree of awareness, and that this can be basically a guide to teach you where you might want to, which treatment that you might want to adopt. So first, again, you have to build the funnel. Markets with low spend and awareness and low awareness, again, focusing on brand building impact. For number 2, improve the funnel. This can be very useful for markets with low awareness but high brand spend. And again, the goal here would really be to adopt the best practices across the funnel. Number 3 would be optimize the funnel. So these kind of markets would be high awareness and low brand spend. So it's basically, again, where you're trying to figure out where should you optimize those splits across the funnel. And 4, to expand the funnel. These are markets with high awareness and high brand spend. And really here, the recommendation is you've already kind of optimized these funnel stages, and really what you're trying to do is to figure out, well, what are the scaling opportunities? So I'm just going to take you through a couple of examples and case studies now. So if we look at build the funnel, the kind of thing here, again, is really just to begin to introduce those brand optimized campaigns. Why? Again, you're trying to build brand awareness, not only now, but for future campaigns. You can see a recommended test set up there on the slide. So this is a multi-cell setup where the difference is the awareness campaign. And again, we go for a holdout lift test here because we're expecting that these audiences will be different and that the baselines will be different. The case study that I can recommend here is with Pandora. If you just click onto the next slide, please. In this particular case study, they adopted the full funnel approach that you've just seen and saw the kind of improvements that are on the screen here. And again, beyond these improvements, they were also able to continuously build the retargeting audiences as well, and build the efficiencies down the line. Next, on improve the funnel. Again, the aim here is how can you bring your practices better to the best practice? And the kind of testing setups are to adopt broader targeting, which is particularly important in the current ecosystem, whereby, if you're finding yourself with less data, one of the best ways against that and ending up with a smaller pool of users is to just continuously, expand out your targeting. And so by adopting best practices like this and creative best practices, you can just really improve the funnel there. And again, I would recommend a multi-cell brand lift. As an illustration of this, we had one of our partners, NEPA, who carried out an MMM study. And if you just want to click onto the next slide, please, you'll see the results from that study. So again, I'm just focusing on broad targeting here, but there's others that I might have focused on, but you're looking at a 75% increase in efficiency. And I think that even the inputs for frequency are particularly interesting here. So even with 1 impression per week on average, it resulted in 4x lift, and that these results would be compounded actually by increasing up to 2 impressions. And this is a piece of research that you can find on the NEPA website. Next, we have optimize the funnel. Again, the sort of key here is you're trying to think about how can you find those optimal budget splits, and you can kind of see various options. It might be, high of like 70% of your budget on awareness, or it might be just like versus 30% sales, or you might adopt a different split. And the idea would be that you could then test this again with a multi-cell study and see which of the optimizations work best for you. And again, by way of a case study, but this time this is yet another MMM study here, but this one coming from Nielsen. They found that, by adopting some of the budget splits that we've been speaking about, that it can drive up to 45% higher ROAS.
Paul, I know there's a few more slides to get through. It's super interesting. Apologies, I'm gonna ask you to stop there. We've got a few minutes left just to run through our session with Pete and Sean. We can follow up with some additional content for the people on the call. So I'm going to pass you over to Pete and Sean.
Thanks so much, Paul. I think this. I obviously spend a lot of time with this. Sean, you and I have spent a lot of time thinking about these themes respectively. And with just a couple of minutes, I wanted to start with talking very briefly about the Home Happier campaign, which I think is a good reflection of some of these themes, the idea of full funnel marketing. So I would love to hear from you within the organization. What were some of the biggest shifts that the marketing team had to make to support a more full funnel approach?
I think we're on a journey. I don't think there is a point in time where we decided that upper funnel or full funnel was right for us. Over the past few years, we've been on a journey where we're kind of increasing the base and then gradually becoming more upper funnel focused. I think we're very fortunate in that within the Bed Bath organization, we're very, very data driven and customer inspired. And as we were on the journey and as we did more testing and as we did more awareness tactics, the data reaffirmed that it is the right thing for us. So I would say it hasn't been an immediate change. And as we listened to some of the other speakers, a lot of it really resonated with me. I think both Paul and I think Sam kind of touched on the importance of creative, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think for me and our team, we wanted to take more of an ownership part in that. So while our subject matter expertise is media execution, we felt a responsibility to make sure that we're partnering with the creatives to make sure that the campaigns were right. I think for all of us, Home Happier was quite an obvious campaign for us. We've all, including Hannah, I think spent a lot of times in our homes over the past year or moved homes over the past year. So the creative team made a lot of sense for us. But me and my team felt responsibility to guide kind of that process. And that meant partnering with Facebook and the Creative Studio or some of our other partners and taking advantage of their creative resources to make sure as we kind of put meaningful dollars behind some upper funnel tactics that we're designing it with, I suppose, the baseline of all of our tests over the past year and the things that have worked or not, working to understand what the creative best practices are. And let's make sure that we're designing for performance, and there are things that we know work, and there might be new tests that we want to do, but we really wanted to have more of an ownership piece there. We're also fortunate that we get some very real-time performance data from our customers. Day in, day out, we see products that are trending. We get data and insights from Facebook, from Google and Pinterest as well. So we know what people are searching now and what's trending and what we think is going to be of interest to them over the coming weeks and months. So again, us providing insights to share those with the organization helped us build a plan that we felt like was data-driven, based on kind of prior smaller tests over the past few years. And really, we were able to kind of put forward a strategy that was, again, upper funnel or full funnel focused. That is, it's not really, again, a step on an evolution versus a marked change from where we've been previously.
Yeah, I like hearing you talk about it as an evolution. I think, you know, a lot of the themes that Paul talked about are not something that you can stand up overnight. So I'm curious to hear you use the word media excellence. How have you thought about structuring those kinds of evaluations for both short-term and long-term?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think as a digital marketer, I think over the past few years, it's been very, very easy to lean in on the performance perspective and look at a day's performance or a few hours performance or kind of a week or 28 days. I think we've been, the data available to us is a lot easier to track kind of that immediate direct response types of tactics. But again, I think we all kind of agree with kind of Paul's kind of full funnel approach and the need to have more upper funnel. So we've been very deliberate, and we've kind of hired some smart people and hired some smart technology in order to solve that piece. And really what we're looking to do is kind of balance the short-term media efficiency with maybe more medium-term or longer-term media effectiveness. So we're trying to balance those two needs. And again, it's a learning path for us. And again, for each, there's KPIs, and there's generally a series of KPIs. Again, kind of more near-term conversion, etc. But for the more medium-term engagement, awareness, views, site visits, the types of customers that we're engaging, and again, connecting all of that together so that, again, there isn't one source of truth. It is looking at a series of data points, and then using, I suppose, our collective wisdom, partnering with our agency partners to set a strategy on kind of what the goal is, what the signals or KPIs of success looks like, and then kind of test and repeat to make sure that we're balancing kind of both of those goals.
Thanks, Sean. That's really interesting. It I think aligns with a lot of the sort of cycle that I gathered from Paul's content. So I think we were right at time. So I'm going to cut off there and hand back to Nitin. But I really appreciate your time and your insights.
Thanks for slotting me in just before lunch. Lovely spot.
Thank you both. Thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you to all of our attendees. I thought it was a really great session. If you have any further questions following the event, just email us at marketing@keplergroup.com. I'm happy to take your questions. I think we will be potentially sending out a post-webinar survey. We also have a recording of the webinar that we make available. Again, thank you all for joining. Thanks to everyone who presented today. We look forward to seeing you again soon.